afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Miss P Presents with me, Miss P. And Geoffrey. No, I'm fine, Geoffrey. I was just smiling. This week we are discussing my top 10 novels of the 1970s. So, without further ado, grab yourselves a drink. And let's get talking. First up on the list we have The Sea by Iris Murdoch, published in 1978. This is an interesting and unusual book that is, whilst fiercely intelligent and beautifully descriptive, also likely to divide opinion. Without wishing to say something obvious about a Booker Prize-winning novel, it is astonishingly impressive, though some might also find it a little bit of a trudge. Its central character, Charles Arrowby, is gloriously ridiculous as the pompous, egotistic, self-absorbed, retired theatre director who has moved to the seaside in order to escape London. Charles spends his days being a fusty little hermit, reminiscing about bygone days and planning his meals with excruciating care. In my opinion, the book is worth reading simply for its divine menu plans, if nothing else. It's also very funny and provides the reader with a fascinating study of obsession, self-deceit, and memory. Next up, we have The Women's Room by Marilyn French, published in 1977. First of all, big respect for this title. Thank you, Geoffrey. In this seminal work, French presents a despairing vision of women's lot in 1950s America. The central character is Mira, a suburban housewife who strives to make herself attractive and agreeable, as society demands. Despite her efforts, Mira receives only punishment and hardship. Her existence is bleak, and change of any kind seems beyond her control. It's a busy, eventful book full of character and emotion, sometimes tough, but always interesting and insightful. As a woman born in the early 90s, many elements of this narrative, thankfully, seem quite alien. The lives of French's female characters are harrowing. The complete lack of choice is terrifying. What was the norm for Western women 70 years ago is not so now. And yet, despite this, it is of course still fiercely relevant. It'll make you think, question, and challenge the current status quo, and will inspire feelings of hope, courage, and determination. Next up, we have Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy by John le Carré, published in 1974. Considered by many to be his masterpiece, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy has everything you could ever desire in a spy novel, and more. It's highly atmospheric, beautifully descriptive, and creepingly suspenseful. It tells the story of George Smiley, a retired intelligence officer who is summoned back to work in order to uncover the Soviet mole who has managed to infiltrate the highest ranks of the British intelligence service. In stark contrast to that other great intelligence officer, Ian Fleming's James Bond, Smiley is poorly dressed, rather rotund, and unceasingly unglamorous.
Style appalling. Patently a fabrication from beginning to end. Just could be the real thing.
But his apparent blandness is deceptive, and as readers we adore his thoroughly British, polite, taciturn nature. The plot is labyrinth-like but totally engrossing, and alongside the richness of le Carré's language, you'll be hooked from the very start. Geoffrey? What's this? Geoffrey! Oh my goodness. With deepest apologies for my absence last week, your servant, Geoffrey. Geoffrey, you know you really didn't need to do this. I was fine on my own. Just don't let it happen again, all right? Let's try it on. How did you know? I love it, Joffrey. Do you think it's my colouring? You're right, it's perfect. Well, cheers! Next up, we have Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont by Elizabeth Taylor, published in 1971. This is a gorgeous book about an elderly widow who is living out her last days at the Claremont Hotel in London. Mrs. Palfrey's fellow residents are an odd bunch of eccentrics. Some are friendly, some grumpy, whilst others are unashamedly nosy.
Mrs. Post, postpone interrogations for later. Let them have dinner in peace.
Sorry? I didn't mean to.
Determined to keep busy and to keep up appearances, Mrs. Palfrey always dresses with care and writes to everyone she could think of to offer an invitation to dinner. Unfortunately, no replies are forthcoming, and Mrs. Palfrey finds herself subject to incessant piteous probing from her fellow guests. And then she meets Ludo, an aspiring young writer who happens upon her one rainy afternoon after she slips in the street. Not having yet received word from her grandson, Ludo agrees to pose as the relation himself, marking the beginning of their charming but unlikely friendship.
I'm Desmond. Of course, I can see the resemblance is uncanny. Oh, but please sit down.
It's sweet, witty, and so easy to read. Next up, we have Kane and Abel by Jeffrey Archer, published in 1979. Archer is an absolute master storyteller. Kane and Abel is so rich, so vivid, so detailed, and at the same time so easy to read. The story spans 60 years, beginning with the births of two baby boys. One, the son of a Boston millionaire, born at a hospital and received with great delight. The other is born to a mother who dies moments after having him, and is found in the woods by a family of impoverished Polish immigrants. Both grow up to be incredibly ambitious and powerful, and become rivals who spend their lives attempting to destroy each other. This novel is so well considered and so skillfully written. I can guarantee that once you start reading it, you won't want to put it down. Joffrey, why is there a fly in here? Where's it gone now? Well, have you been cleaning enough, Joffrey? Why are there flies here, amongst my clothes, in my drinks? But of course, I'm sure you know best, Joffrey, and you are a professional and you are the best, so I leave it to your judgment. Next up, we have The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, published in 1970. In her best-selling debut novel, Morrison tells the story of Pecola Breedlove, a young, impoverished black girl growing up in post-Depression America. The novel takes its title from Pecola's desire to have blue eyes like those of her classmates, Hollywood stars, and advertising images. This white standard of beauty, dictated by society, causes Pecola to feel trapped. If only she had blue eyes, she thinks, she would be validated, she would be beautiful, she would be free, she would be seen.
Before I eat my Mary Janes, I look at each one of them. Each little girl is named Mary Jane. She has blonde curls and big blue eyes. And she looks at me with those eyes, and she's my friend. She has a special treat for me. A peanut buttery treat that'll last a long time on my tongue. I eat my Mary Jane. For a second, it's almost like I'm Mary Jane. Lovely, lovely Mary Jane. Beautiful, happy Mary Jane.
It's a powerful, poetic, tragic novel that takes you on a journey you'll never forget. Well done, Joffrey. Next up, we have Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion, published in 1970. Didion's writing is like whiskey and cigarettes. Delicious, intoxicating, addictive. The novel begins with the voice of Maria, an out-of-work actress in her early 30s. She speaks frankly about her life, informing us that she is divorced and is mother to a little girl who's in hospital. Play It As It Lays is a story about feeling empty, about feeling like you're a bystander in your own life, constantly watching yourself as though the things that are happening to you are happening to someone else instead. As Maria recovers from a mental breakdown, she remembers her life before she was admitted.
Here are some typical questions the doctors here asked me. I'm to answer yes or no. Do I think a large number of people are guilty of bad sexual conduct? Do I believe my sins are unpardonable? Have I been disappointed in love? How could I answer? How could it apply?
Her existence was both glamorous and grim, a mixture of Hollywood dreams and dirty realities. It's a mesmerising, elliptical novel that seems to flash past you in an instant, just like cars on the motorway do. Next up, we have Maurice by E.M. Forster, published in 1971. Written in 1914, revised several times, and then finally published the year after Forster's death, Maurice is the beautiful story of a privileged young man who grows up to find that he is attracted to his own sex. Whilst at Cambridge, Maurice meets Clive, a fellow student who introduces him to ancient Greek writings about same-sex love, and with whom Maurice experiences a kind of emotional awakening. Maurice goes on to have a relationship with Clive's gamekeeper, Alec, a union that is far more fervent, more physical, and less inhibited than that of Maurice and Clive's. Forster's writing is gorgeous. It's spare and passionate and compelling in its honesty. Maurice is a novel which suggests that love will always prevail. It's brave, it's poetic, and it will fill you with hope. Next up, we have Fear of Flying by Erica Jong, published in 1973. I love this book because it's so rambunctious. It's sassy, it's assured, it's brash, and it's bold. We are introduced to the novel's protagonist, a young poet named Isadora Wing, en route to Vienna for a business conference with her husband. Having felt dissatisfied with her marriage for some time, Isadora decides to cut and run, journeying across Europe in search of freedom in the form of uninhibited passion. I would suggest that nowadays it's fairly difficult for a piece of fiction to shock us, and yet the ferocity of Jong's writing, the suddenness and the openness of her phrasing was so unexpected that at times I did feel my eyebrows twitching. It's a great read, and the images that Jong creates are just to die for. They're very sensory, evocative, and all-consuming. If you haven't yet read this, then fasten your seatbelt, you're in for one hell of a ride. And finally we have Sophie's Choice by William Styron, published in 1979. The novel is told from the point of view of aspiring writer Stingo, an insecure young man who is fixated on achieving professional success and gaining sexual experience. In the summer of 1947, Stingo meets Nathan and Sophie, a passionate but dysfunctional couple with an extravagant lifestyle that greatly appeals to the 22-year-old Stingo.
I helped fulfill Sophie's prophecy about the three of us. We became the best of friends.
It's an incredibly impressive, well-structured narrative that is very difficult to read in places. As the novel progresses, Stinger is drawn further into Nathan and Sophie's relationship and eventually learns the traumatic truth about Sophie's past, her life in pre-war Poland, her experience in a concentration camp, and the devastating choice that she was forced to make. It's absolutely heart-wrenching and really brings to life the atrocious experiences of the victims of the Holocaust. That was Miss P's Top 10 Novels of the 1970s. Join me next time, where I'll be reviewing my top 10 novels of the 1980s. You won't want to miss it. Joffrey, I was thinking about dinner. I was thinking we could get a takeaway this evening to celebrate you coming back. I mean, to celebrate your aunt's recovery from her grave illness. What's that place? With the oysters. You know, the oyster place. Yes. Yes, we should get some oysters, maybe a little more champagne. And you can have some this time, Joffrey. How about that now? Don't say I don't spoil you. Thank you so much for watching my channel. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe so you can keep up to date with all things Miss P Presents. See you next time.